Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Top of the Box, where I, Luke Pickles, Dungeon Master for EatCrit and Survive, and board game enthusiast Mr. Imp are going to talk to you about some board games. And this week is a topic that I think is pretty pertinent to the world that we live in at the moment. Sort of. The last couple of years have been difficult for people to get together and play board games in person. People understand why. And quite frankly, we wouldn't be in this hobby if it wasn't for the social aspect of being able to get down and play a game with our friends and play them in person. But there has been such a development over the last couple of years in board game digital media. There is Board Game Arena, there's Tabletopia, there's Sovranti, who are, by the way, partners of EatCrit 5. I'll be linked to that in the description below. And there has never been a better time to be playing board games online digitally. Now, I fully understand that a lot of people, myself included, prefer to pick these games off the shelf and play them in person. That's what this is all about. That's what the community is all about. But there are a lot of people who make their way by playing board games on Twitch and on YouTube and using these digital platforms. And I've found in our 56 odd games that we have done by this point, playing on Tabletopia, BGA, Sovereignty, whatever, there are some games that I just prefer playing digitally. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with having those preferences for those particular games for certain reasons. Or I find them easier to play online. So let's explore that. Let's talk about 10 games that I prefer to play digitally and why. So at number 10 is the game that introduced the world to this little guy, the Meeple. It's Carcassonne, and I can already hear the internet rage. I love Carcassonne, okay? It is one of my favourite games. It is my favourite game to introduce people to the hobby, because it is so simple. For the uninitiated, Carcassonne is a tile placement game where you are putting little tiles down and expanding out from one singular tile. You are building cities, you are building roads, you are building fields and places, and there are all sorts of different expansions that you can throw in to try and just change the game up a little bit. There is only one scenario where I prefer to play Carcassonne digitally, and that is when I'm on my own, I'm playing solo, and I'm playing it on the Carcassonne app. The reason why I prefer playing on the Carcassonne app is because it has a really neat little feature that you can turn on or off as you prefer to keep track of the fields. It also has a bunch of AIs that you can play against at varying difficulties and at various player counts, so you can challenge yourself at different levels and generally just sort of improve and get used to playing Carcassonne if you want to. And that's neat. I remember standing in the queue for a ride at Alton Towers and just going, well, I'm on my own here. Let's get a quick game of Carcassonne going. And from playing Carcassonne so many times physically, I know that some people do struggle with keeping track of the fields. I know there are certain people, content creators, who hate the farmers because they find it difficult to keep track of or difficult to understand in some aspects. And whilst I personally disagree with that, I think the farmers are a great addition. They're something different and they are worth quite a lot of points in if you understand how to get things going with them. Being able to keep track of who's in control of what fields through some simple hatched lines on the field, on the tiles, on the app is great. And I think that's what makes playing Carcassonne on the app preferable to playing it in person. Now, again, only when I'm playing on my own. If I've got Carcassonne and I can pull it out, there it is. If I can pull Carcassonne out and put it on the table, I will absolutely do that. If I'm on my own, and I've got 20 minutes, 10 minutes that I want to kill, I'm going to play a game of Carcassonne. And I'll just play it on my own. So that is my number 10, Carcassonne. Let's see what comes in at number 9. At number 9 is The Crew, Mission Deep Sea, or The Quest for Planet 9. Whichever, they're the same game, really. The Crew is a cooperative trick-taking game where you're trying to go through a series of different missions and progress through the book. You've got about 50 missions to get through, and you're just sort of progressing through the campaign. And I'll be honest, it's a game that didn't hit when we played it in person. I think I got it as part of a Zatu mystery box. It just came one day. It wasn't a game that I'd been actively seeking. It had just turned up one day, and we thought, we'll play it. And it didn't land with us. But I then picked it up and played it on Board Game Arena, and I've been playing it since March, roughly, with a couple of friends online, and we have been playing it all the way through, going mission to mission. And there have been some missions that we've played that have taken us a long time to do because of life things get in the way, and we're doing it turn-based. So one of us will take a turn, we'll put our phone down or our laptop or whatever, and we'll walk away from the game, and then we'll come back to it when we've had an email saying it's our turn. And it does sometimes take us a little while because life things get in the way, and that's absolutely fine. It's not a problem. We knew what we were doing getting into it. So it feels like some missions, if we get stuck on them, we have been stuck doing them for months and weeks, and it's just, it's exhausting. Even though we've only played it 10 times, which in a real game on the table would have taken maybe 20 minutes, half an hour or something to sort of get through that many times. But then the feelings that we got of finishing that mission were euphoric. It was fantastic to have achieved this mission that was incredibly difficult and have passed it, and it felt like we had been stuck for a long time. And that's not a feeling you get when you play it physically. The other thing, of course, is that because it's digital, all the setup is done for you. And that's something that I think we didn't like in our group, was that having to do the constant setup and takedown and setups takedown for each mission was a little bit laborious and took away from the game experience for us. Whether we're impatient, we just like to play a game through. We don't want to have to be setting it up every so often. I don't know. That could be a reason. I don't know why it didn't hit for us, but that's what the point of online communities are for, is to meet people to play these games with. So that was my experience with number 9, The Crew, Quest for Planet 9. At number 8, we're staying in space with Race for the Galaxy. This is a card-driven tableau building game where you are playing down different cards, sacrificing cards from your hand in order to do so. There's an action selection phase that you're choosing from to draw new cards, produce resources, settle new planets, put out new technologies, things like that. You're building out a tableau to get to 12 cards, and then that wins you the game based on number of victory points. Now, playing this in person versus playing it on Board Game Arena means you're having to keep track of a lot more when you're playing it physically. What I mean is you're having to keep an eye on what's in your tableau, and it's very easy to miss things because of what's on the cards. On Board Game Arena, it's a little easier because you can hover your mouse over the cards and see what the description is and what all the details are on the cards. You can understand how they interact and what the symbols mean, which makes it a lot easier to play if you don't really understand the game symbols or know it that well, you haven't played it that much. So I find that is just an easier way for me to play it. It's nothing wrong with the game. I still like playing it. I just prefer playing it digitally because I can use my mouse to keep track of everything. It also means I don't have to keep track of things like money and victory points because Board Game Arena will keep all that detail for me. It's a lot easier that way. So I will absolutely play a game of Race for the Galaxy, but I do like to play it on Board Game Arena because of that sense of ease, and there's one less thing to worry about. So that is my number 8, The Race for the Galaxy. And number 7 is the game that is probably my game of 2022, and it is Planet Unknown from Adam's Apple Games, available on Sovranti. We have played this on stream a couple of times with Sovranti, and it is a fantastic tile placement bumping tracks game where you are going to be placing out polyomino tiles that are selected from a Lazy Susan and just placed out onto your planet, gaining various benefits that will bump up different tracks to do different things. And when we played on Sovranti, it was absolutely fantastic. It was a lot of fun. It is very reminiscent of something like Art of Cats, Cartographers, all those sort of great polyomino games. You're just putting these things out, bumping tracks, and making things happen. It's great to build those combos and just see them all play off each other. But what I like about playing it digitally, I mean, it's right here. I have got it physically, and I've played it a couple of times physically. But the only thing that is a slight hassle with it is is shuffling the tiles at the end of the game, resetting the game for a new one. Because it's not as easy as just shuffling cards to just sort of shuffle these polyomino tiles together and put them back into the Lazy Susan and then have it for transport. But obviously on Sovereignty, it does all that for you, and you can see where the legal terrain placements are. You can see where the problems are coming in. You can see how, if you're placing something here, it's illegal, or how it's not benefiting you in the optimal way. It just gives you less things to sort of keep an eye on. But it does have, it's a wonderful implementation on Sovereignty. It's one of the first games we played on Sovereignty, and it's just utterly fantastic. It got me to buy the game, and that's another list that we're going to be doing at some point, is games that I bought because I played them digitally. So keep an eye out for that. Planet Unknown is fantastic. It's a great game. I really love playing it. But playing it digitally does make it an overall easier experience. There's absolutely nothing wrong with playing it in person. I love playing it in person. It is still fantastic. It's still one of the top games of 2022 if I play it in person. It just makes it a little easier. And ultimately playing online does make it a little easier, makes everything a little easier. And that's kind of what is the matter of playing games online. You know, it's going to make things easier because of the automation. So that's number 7. And number 6 is the card-driven fireworks display building game of Hanabi. Now, Hanabi comes in a dinky little box. It is not difficult at all to cart it around and take with you wherever you go. In it, you are playing cards to build a firework display. But the twist here is you can't see your own cards. Everyone else can that you're playing with, but you can't see your own cards. So you're giving clues and telling each other what your cards are. So I may have in my hand a series of 1s, a 3 and a 5. And I'm trying to play my cards down in ascending order with a range of colours and not playing duplicates of the same number, and I'm making sure that I play them in order. So I may be sat here with my cards and I can see that Ross has got 2 5s in his hand, so I can flip over one of our clue tokens and say, those 2 are 5s. So he knows he's got 2 5s and he shouldn't discard those. He doesn't know anything else about them, their colour or what's in his hand. Otherwise, it's just that he has 2 5s. And I like playing this on Board Game Arena because Board Game Arena keeps note. What I mean by that is that each of the cards will have underneath it 2 tabs. One about the colour and one about the number. And that makes it a lot easier to keep track. Because you then have it being played probably the way that it's meant to be played, and it's being played as a cooperative deduction game, as opposed to just a memory game. Because that's what it becomes when you're playing it physically. If you're playing it with more than 4 people, I think the upper limit is maybe 6, it's a lot harder to keep track of not only what you've said to other people, but what's been said to you about what's in your hands. And having that little reminder, that little note for you, and those little annotations makes it a lot easier to know what information is available to both of you, if you're playing 2-player, or collectively both being yourself and your fellow players, so to speak. I really like playing Hanabi. I think it's great. Ross and I played a whole bunch of it just last week. We just went through a whole bunch of games of it whilst we had some downtime, probably during our lunch break more than anything else. So we really like playing it. It works well in person. It works great on Board Game Arena because you have that little bonus, a little extra annotation. So that is number 6. Before we get to the next one, we are going to talk about the people who helped make this possible, and that is GameTee, who are wonderful providers of gaming gear and goods. You can go and check them out. They make some wonderful stuff, including cushions, t-shirts, candles, maps, all sorts of wonderful digital artwork, and a lot of things in between. So you can go and check out gametee.co.uk, and you can enter the code EatCritSurvive to get yourself 5% off. There is some wonderful stuff there that I've probably got flickering around up here. You can go check them out. They make some great stuff. And number 5 is the Mega Uwe Rosenberg hit, A Feast for Odin. The worker placement, tile placement, resource management, hand management, there's a lot of things that go on in this game, where you're just trying to get as many victory points as you have, but you start at a massive handicap because you're trying to place your workers to gain tiles so that you can then place those tiles in either your feast hall or play them out to your map and cover those up for different bonuses to get more income and to get away from all those negative points. Feast of Odin is a great game. It's complex, it's got a lot going for it, you've got some great little worker placement elements to it, but I do not want to play it physically, really. I will still play it physically. If someone came up to me and said, hey Luke, at a convention or something, hey Luke, let's play a game of Feast for Odin, let me teach you how to go, I'd be like, sure, absolutely, all for it, let's sit down and play this. I know that playing a Feast for Odin will take a long time to do physically, and that's fine. I don't mind a longer game, I don't mind a heavier game. But I don't necessarily understand the game well enough to be able to play it confidently. At the moment, I've been playing it on Board Game Arena, and it's great because I can hover over the actions and see what interacts with what. So I can go down each column and say, okay, I could do this, I could trade in this money for a sheep, and I can use that sheep and I can trade it in for food later, or I could get another sheep later and I can breed them so I can get another sheep later and I can just build a wacky engine of some sort out of just sheep. And a Feast for Odin is great for that. There's a lot of paths that you can take for it, and I've been able to explore that on Board Game Arena. I don't think I would have had the same experience trying to explore it in person. Probably because I wouldn't have been able to get it to the table as many times as I have digitally. So I think that says something for the replayability of the game, that I've been wanting to play it so many times. But I don't think I'd be able to get it to the table that often. It's also quite difficult to find these days, for some reason. I've seen it in a gaming store, but it has been sat there for a while, so I don't know whether it's just hard to find or someone ordered it and they haven't been able to pick it up for whatever reason. But yeah, a little bit of a tricky one. So that is A Feast for Odin at number 5. And number 4 is a game that may surprise you. It's one of my favourite games, but it's one of my favourite games to play solo digitally on Tabletopia. It is the roll and write, flip and write map drawing game of Cartographers. Now, I know what you might be thinking, you love this game, Luke. And I do. I love playing it with a bunch of people, with my friends, and drawing the maps and doing it in colour pencils is quite satisfying. But for those of you who don't know how Cartographers plays, you are drawing a map for Queen Gimnax, who has set out particular edicts which will influence your scoring over the 4 rounds. In each of the different seasons are scoring 2 of the scoring criteria. So in spring you'll score criteria A and B. In the summer you'll score B, C. In autumn you'll do C, D, and so on. And at the end you'll score D and A together. Different things will come out of there, different polyomino shapes with different terrain types, and monsters may come out. So there's all sorts of things that will sort of interfere with you. And I love this game. It's easily in my top 10. It was certainly the last time I did the top 10. So think of that in the description below. And it's just easy to play on Tabletopia. Because on Tabletopia, you can play a solo game of it on the Tabletopia app in about 5 minutes. You can also play it on the Thunderworks Games app itself and do it that way. But by playing it on Tabletopia, you can just play a game, speed through it, and get it done, and score it yourself, and play it solo. And if you want to play it solo, I think that's a lot better than drawing it on a physical map. Because you only have 100 map sheets, or 75 if you're using one of the map packs. Whereas Tabletopia is infinite. You can just hit refresh and play a new game. And it's nice to sort of have that mini competition with yourself if you have a spare 5 minutes on your lunch break and you just want to get it out, get a Cartographers out, and just play it. See what score you can get. So that's my number 4. Ron writes Cartographers. And number 3 is Sushi Go Party. Now, this is a bit of a placeholder for pretty much every game that has some sort of drafting mechanic in it. Sushi Go, Isle of Cats, Seven Wonders, those games. Sushi Go Party is available on both Sovranti and Board Game Arena. Isle of Cats is also available on both of those platforms. Seven Wonders is only on BGA. But they all have the same issue of card drafting. In Sushi Go, you are drafting, and Sushi Go Party, I should say, you are drafting cards from each other. You're taking little sushi cards and you're trying to get them to score points from different sources. And your sashimi will score for certain rolls. Your nigiri will score in certain ways depending on the tiles that are placed out, the cards that are being dealt to you. And because you're drafting them from each other, there is the possibility that as you place the cards down to the next person, somehow someone has got a different number of cards to the person next to them, the person they've just taken from or the person they're giving to. Somehow you have ended up with the wrong number of cards. And it can sort of take a little while for people to figure things out as to why it's gone wrong. Whereas on Sovranti or Board Game Arena, it's done for you. You can just push a button and it will pass it off. And you'll just watch it disappear into the yonder, wishing it would write more. But that's it. That's sort of the main thing about the drafting games. We tried playing Isle of Cats on Tabletopia. I'll be honest, it did not go as well. Because Tabletopia is more of a is a bit more of a sandbox, like Tabletop Simulator. In order to draft cards in Tabletopia, you had to physically take all the cards out of your hand, put them down, move them across to someone else. So it was pretty much the same as playing physically. You had to put your cards down and pass them along, and there was still that chance of it going wrong. When we played it again on Sovranti, it was a much cleaner experience, it was a much happier experience. So having that automation in place for a drafting game is great. And I still love playing those games. I think those games are fantastic. Sushi Go Party comes out every so often, particularly when we've got 8 people. It's great to just whack it on the table, give it a play. So Sushi Go Party, or quite frankly, just card drafting games in general, goes in at my number 3. And number 2 is a big Stefan Feld game called Castles of Burgundy. Now, I've seen a few playthroughs, or I had seen a few playthroughs of the Castle of Burgundy previously, and it didn't really pull me in. I wasn't a fan of the art style or what was going on with it. But I've changed my mind on it a little bit, somewhat. It's only if I play digitally, though, which is what this list is all about. So in the Castle of Burgundy, you are rolling dice, and then you are drafting tiles from a communal area based on the roll of those dice, and then placing them into your own duchy board based on the values of the dice, and placing them just out into different spots based on the colour and, again, the number of your dice. Now, it's great if you want a language-independent game and everyone knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on with a lot of the symbols on the different tiles, particularly some of the tiles which are just, particularly the sort of the rule-breaking tiles, or the sort of the gold ones that let you do things a little bit differently, and the beige tiles, which are just buildings that have instant rewards for you. I don't know what all of those mean, so having Board Game Arena have the option to just float my mouse over it, find out what that tile does, rather than have to flip through the rulebook every single time I play it, is great. It helps me strategize a little bit more, so I find that incredibly easy. Do I want to play it physically? I probably should. I should probably play it physically at some point and find that there is a great reference guide somewhere that is really easy for me to just go, oh yeah, that's what this one does. But at the moment, I'm perfectly content playing it digitally. So, for me, that's it. It's my number 2, Castle Burgundy. So let's see, what's at number 1? At number 1 is the reason this list exists, because it is a game that I played on Board Game Arena. We played it on stream, and it is a game that I just went, wow, I forgot how good this game is, but my life is it a pain to do physically, and that is Dice Forge. Dice Forge is a game where you are trying to collect money and points through a series of dice rolls. You have 2 dice, which will have different faces on them that you can pop off and replace. By buying new faces, you can upgrade them and score victory points, sunstones, moonstones, and coins. And some other things as well, depending on the expansions. But playing it digitally, you don't have the every 5 minutes or so when it's your turn of you're upgrading your dice, you have to pop the face off, put a new one in, pop a different face off, put that in, having a spare piece to one side just so you can go boop, and take it out. It is clunky to play in person, and there's nothing wrong with it apart from that. It just takes a lot more time. And playing it on Board Game Arena was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I'd forgotten how much I liked the game. But I don't think I'll ever want to play it physically, because I just have that sensation and experience of popping the dice off. I just prefer playing it online now. And that's why it's number one on this list. Because the other games I'll probably play physically at some point. Like I said with the Castles of Burgundy, I have not played it physically, but I don't have a huge desire to do so. If someone presents it to me, I'll go, sure, I'll give it a go. I understand what I'm doing here, mostly. Same with A Feast for Odin. Physically. And that's not an indictment on the game. I think it's a really fun concept. And I think it was the only way that they could have made that work. I think it's a very unique system that they have. But it's not the easiest practically. And being able to just sort of pop the dice around as you like, it's great. Being able to do it in BGA is fantastic. You can play it with the expansions. You don't have to worry about that. So that is my number one for games that I prefer to play digitally. And that is my list for games that I prefer to play digitally, in general, with a few exceptions. As I said, with some of them, they're only if I'm playing them on my own. But for the most part, they are games I prefer to play digitally. What are some of your games that you prefer to play digitally? And when I say that, I mean board games specifically. You don't need to tell me about playing Spider-Man or on the PlayStation 5 or whatever. I'm intrigued about board games and seeing what ones you prefer to play digitally over playing physically. One last thing before I disappear off is that I've said this. I love playing games physically if I can. But being able to play with my friends digitally has been fantastic over the last couple of years. And it has not stopped me buying games. Like some of these games, like right here, these games are this year they came out. Last year. They're all fairly recent. So I think there's scope for the next list, which is going to be about games that I have bought because I played them digitally. And I think it's a real boon to have these digital plays. But tell me what you think. Let me know in the comments below about what games you prefer playing digitally. What games you prefer playing physically. That's an equally valid discussion. But while you're here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out some of our other stuff that we do here. And check us out on twitch.tv/EatCritSurvive, where we go through these games together. So, until then, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.